Story number one, Biden pushed out. Story number two, did he really have a choice? And story number three, is Kamala Harris like an interim head football coach? This is the Will Cain Show, streaming live on Fox News YouTube, Fox News Radio, Fox News Facebook, and the homepage of the site. Bobby Burack filling in for Will today. Coming up later in the show, we're going to break down the breaking news of Biden bowing out of the race from really all angles. We have a highlight panel coming up for you. But first, because of the news, Will Cain recorded a special last night, and we're going to hear from him first.
It's the first time since 1968, since Lyndon Baines Johnson, that a sitting president did not seek re-election. I want to walk through the history today. We'll talk about who will inherit the mantle, who could possibly challenge Vice President Kamala Harris. What's the process at the Democratic convention? Who has so far endorsed Kamala Harris and the effort to turn Joe Biden into a hero? But I think we have to start today with the fact that an insurrection, a coup, has been completed within the Democrat Party. The will of the Democratic voter, those people that went to the ballot box in the primaries in their state, was that Joe Biden would be their nominee for president. And I think it is earth-shattering. I think it rocks the United States of America and perhaps its delusion of self-governance to its very core and to the foundation, to see that Joe Biden was forced out by an oligarchy of corporate media, rich billionaire donors, and political elite, completely deleting the Democrat voter, showing them that their voice was absolutely impotent. And it was done. It was done while raising the banner, running through the battlefield, and screaming that they are the protectors of democracy. I mean, this is absolutely comical. It's sad. It's scandalous. And quite honestly, it should make every single one of us reflect on the idea that we are a self-governing republic. A sitting president, one who clearly wanted to seek re-election, was bullied, harassed, threatened, and pushed out of the race after the voters had already selected him by some oligarchy who control the power, the bosses among the Democrats. I don't think this can be overstated. I don't think you can find a word that is hyperbolic. I think this is an absolute and pure scandal. And if you want to double down on scandal, the exact people that participated in a cover-up of the senility of the sitting president, who dismissed just a few weeks ago any questions over his frailty as cheap fakes, who lied to the American public for 3.5 years, the exact people who perpetuated this cover-up are those that stand to benefit from now his undeniable and obvious senility. Notably, the chief cover-up now looks to be the leading candidate as a Democrat for president of the United States, Kamala Harris. David Sachs, Silicon Valley rich guy, recent convert from Democrat to Republican, tweeted the following: "First, they told us there was nothing wrong with Biden. Then they threatened to destroy him if he didn't leave the race. Now they're calling him a hero. How can you not be sickened by these people?" He's referencing, for example, the praise for Joe Biden now that he has stepped aside and cleared the decks and allowed someone else to step in to take Donald Trump. Nancy Pelosi, former House Speaker, tweeted, "President Joe Biden is a patriotic American who has always put our country first. His legacy of vision, values, and leadership make him one of the most consequential presidents in American history. With love and gratitude to President Biden for always believing in the promise of America and giving people the opportunity to reach their fulfillment. God blessed America with Joe Biden's greatness and goodness." This as she wipes the blood off the knife she just stabbed into the back of Joe Biden. This is modern American Julius Caesar. And this is Brutus. Nancy Pelosi is Brutus. She is the bully. She is the ringleader. She is the one who threatens. She is the mob boss who forced him to his knees, forced him to the sidelines, forced him into the history books, now saying what a great figure he is in America. Let's take a minute here and talk about how suddenly the dialogue is about to change. And when I say change, it's about to change on a dime in America. Joe Biden is going to be feted as a hero. As David Sachs points out, this is going to happen within about a 12-hour period after all of those voices and all those powers painted him accurately as a senile old man incapable of running for office. Those very same voices will now lift him up and exalt him as someone who sacrificed himself at the altar of democracy. That has never been Joe Biden. It will be a complete falsehood. It will be fiction. Joe Biden has, from the beginning of his career, been a craven politician. Now, you might like his politics, but not even you who agree with the policies of Democrats can look at Joe Biden and say he is a selfless American. Joe Biden didn't want to leave the race for president, and he shouldn't have had to leave the voice for president because, again, he was picked by the voters in the Democratic Party. But he didn't want to leave. He was forced to leave. That's not the act of a hero. He has, from the beginning of his career, plagiarized and lied and run for president repeatedly. He has, as all evidence points, surrounded himself with people who have gotten wealthy off his political largesse, from his brother to his son. Joe Biden has reverted to anger when challenged. He has dug his heels in as he considers himself a party outsider, everyday Joe, Amtrak Joe. He is not somebody who has placed the greater good, the republic, even our fake democracy, because we are a constitutional republic, above the will of the people. He has never, ever put himself behind America. And now they will turn and they will call him a hero. What will also happen in a matter of hours is it that Kamala Harris will become the greatest person ever born into America. Charles C.W. Cook, a writer at National Review, an excellent writer at National Review, said, watch what's about to happen in the media when it comes to Kamala Harris. And if you dare question Kamala Harris's greatness, that she might be in the running now for the 5th spot on Mount Rushmore, well, you know how that's going to go. Well, you're going to be racist. The race card is about to be dealt face up. The race card is going to fly around the card table. It's going to challenge 2020. I mean, Aunt Jemima didn't survive the first time, and I don't know if Uncle Ben is still around, but he will certainly not survive 2024. Question Kamala Harris's record? Racist. Question Kamala Harris's past? Racist. Question Kamala Harris's failures as the borders are? Racist. Question how she rose to power and fame? Racist. Dare support Donald Trump? Racist. Now, I think that knife has been dulled. I think that accusation has been blunted, but that doesn't mean they're going to wield that sword no matter how dull the blade. Trust me, everything in America is about to become racist. But I don't think we can move beyond this idea, this incredibly, in my estimation, again, foundation-shattering idea that they have subverted democracy while destroying democracy. There is literally nothing we can take seriously from someone who thwarts the will of the voter while yelling that they're defending democracy. It should make us also not just look forward, but look backwards. I mean, these are the very same people that said you shouldn't question COVID, the vaccine, the death rates, the hospitalization rates, masks, child vaccination, school closures. These are the very same people who tell you that Donald Trump is a Russian asset, that he was cool with Russian bounties on American soldiers, that he said to drink bleach, that he's a threat to democracy, that he said Nazis were very fine people. These are the very same people that have perpetuated hoax after hoax and propaganda after propaganda. And I don't think I have to remind you, because it should be fresh, that just 3 weeks ago, they were telling you that it was inappropriate, that it was a conspiracy, that it was a cheap fake to question Joe Biden's frailty. Just a few months ago, Laura Trump appeared on CNN talking to Jake Tapper. Laura Trump uttered the words. Tapper was challenging her about whether or not she was making fun of Joe Biden's stutter. She's like, no, I didn't even know he had a stutter. Remember the weird stutter get out of jail free card? Remember the weird stutter ripcord on the parachute anytime you question Joe Biden's mind? She said, I didn't even know that he had a stutter. Tapper pressed, moral high ground. How dare you make fun of somebody with a disability? Trump said, I didn't even know that. I was actually questioning his cognitive ability. At which point, steam came out of Tapper's ears. The wheels ground to a halt. The CNN TV moral high ground went, I can't allow you to perpetuate that on our airwaves. You have no evidence. You are not a doctor. How do you diagnose from afar? Just a few months ago, this was the propaganda about Joe Biden's cognitive ability. And now they literally conducted an intra-party coup because of Joe Biden's cognitive inability. And I should say, not because of his inability to run the office of the presidency, but because of his inability, and solely his inability, to, again, win the office of the presidency. Donald Trump has already tweeted out, if he's incapable of running, he's incapable of governing. If he's incapable of running for office, he's incapable of running the United States of America. It should be a call today. It should be a call among his cabinet. It should be a call of all the people that are freshly taking their blades out of the back of Joe Biden to invoke the 25th Amendment. You cannot leave the United States of America compromised for August, September, October, November, and December. You can't leave us in a position leaderless because we have a president who's deep into senility. No. If all of a sudden you have moral high ground, if all of a sudden you're willing to tell the truth, if all of a sudden you're willing to force him out because of his inabilities, you have to force him out of the office. It is a matter of national security. You might as well go ahead and finish the coup. Install Kamala Harris. Invoke the 25th Amendment. Now, what will happen? Will it be Kamala Harris? Here's the mechanics of what's going on right now. Democratic leaders are lining up behind the vice president of the United States. The Congressional Black Caucus has moved to back Kamala Harris. Members of the squad, at least one, and Congresswoman Jayapal have endorsed Kamala Harris. And perhaps most notably, Bill and Hillary Clinton have endorsed Kamala Harris. Notably, very notably, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has not endorsed Kamala Harris. And even more notably, Barack Obama declined so far to endorse the vice president. Olivia Nuzzi, who recently wrote the piece in New York Magazine revealing months of concern of Joe Biden's health, tweeted out Barack Obama not endorsing Kamala Harris. Quote, I have extraordinary confidence that the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges. So what is that process? Well, Joe Biden, again, through a fake primary, has all of the delegates, virtually all of the delegates within the Democratic Party, pledged to his nomination as the president, as the nominee for president of the United States. If he's not going to seek re-election, those delegates, some 3,000, become free to vote however they'd like. In order for a candidate to win now, the Democratic nominee, they have to win a majority. They could do it as soon as the roll call at the Democratic National Convention, or a virtual roll call, some are suggesting could happen in early August before the DNC. Any candidate would have to win something like in the vicinity of 1,600 votes from those delegates, the majority, regardless of the number, the majority of the delegates involved in the DNC. Now, if no one wins a majority on the first round of voting, it can be opened up to any number of candidates. You only have to have 300 delegates voting for you to get yourself into the running, and you would go through round after round after round of voting. That's when you hear of things coming in like a brokered convention, because supporters of one candidate could go and throw their weight behind another candidate if perhaps you have a combined ticket. You start to make backroom deals. You start to figure it out. Now, that is chaos. But before we get to chaos, there would have to be a lot. And I don't think at this point anything should be counted out, because let's just take a quick refresher course. June 27th was the debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And since that time, we have had a complete mutiny within the Democratic Party. We've had the Supreme Court of the United States reaffirm presidential immunity, thus neutering the lawfare to stop Donald Trump. We have had the classified documents case in Florida tossed out against Donald Trump. We've had an attempted assassination of Donald Trump. We've had the Republican National Convention, and we've had a successful coup in the Democratic Party to replace Joe Biden. All in 3 weeks. Crazy. So that chaos I just described, the DNC, not to be dismissed. But for now, it's powerful. It's important that Joe Biden has thrown his weight behind Kamala Harris. Presumably, those delegates pledged to Joe Biden would follow course, follow in the party manner in supporting Kamala Harris. But Joe Biden didn't have the power to withstand the party bosses, the political elite, the corporate media, the billionaire donors. So if those same groups who've already thwarted the will of the voter decide someone else should be the nominee, why would we presume they couldn't thwart the will of the Democratic delegate at the DNC? Money, by the way, would be much easier to transfer to Kamala Harris, all the money raised by the Biden-Harris campaign. There are machinations where they could move that money to the DNC, to a PAC, but it comes with more restrictions. It's not as free-flowing as if it just goes to Kamala to use as she will. It may have to be distributed down ballot if it doesn't go to Kamala, but it could be worked around. And again, if donors decide to get behind somebody else, then it won't be Kamala. But who would throw their hat in the ring? Who would challenge Kamala Harris? I mean, here are the names that everybody talks about. Governor Gavin Newsom of California, Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. These are some of the most popular names, both as vice presidential running mates, but also as potential presidential candidates, challenging or joining Kamala Harris. But in order to get there, all of those delegates would have to overcome everything working in Kamala Harris's favor, like the biggest electoral impediment for Democrats has now just been removed. Say what you will, and I definitely think policies matter. Whatever happens here, whether or not it's Whitmer or Newsom or Harris, it's a continuation of the policies that have led to the last 3 years. It is a continuation of policies that have led to a porous open border, to a fentanyl crisis, to wars on the world stage on multiple fronts, to an economy gripped by inflation, a culture racked with identity politics. But even though those policies would remain, no matter the nominee, you're going to have to overcome the biggest one for the Democratic Party would have been to overcome age and enthusiasm with Joe Biden. Kamala Harris erases that problem. The Democrats have deleted the voter. They've also deleted age and enthusiasm. It will happen. It's happening now. By the time we're speaking together on Sunday night or Monday morning, they will have rallied and they will begin to build enthusiasm for Kamala Harris. So they will remove the biggest impediment in their fight against Donald Trump. But if you want to replace Kamala Harris, you have more than just replacing age and enthusiasm. You're going to have to stand up to identity politics. You're going to have to say that you're a better candidate than a woman of color. And that is going to take serious brass balls in the Democratic Party. That is going to have to take serious persuasive capability, regardless of her shortcomings. Because identity politics is the religion of the modern day Democratic Party. And you now have a patron saint in a woman of color. So good of luck, Gavin Newsom, replacing Kamala Harris. What more if you're Whitmer or Shapiro or Newsom? You'd have to ask yourself, is now the time? Is now the cycle? Donald Trump has a huge head of steam, a massive boulder of momentum. He has the fact that he has survived assassination attempt when his last opponent couldn't survive an inter-party coup. He has a very successful unifying Republican National Convention. He has defeated lawfare, and he's winning in almost every poll. I mean, if you're Kamala Harris or anyone looking to replace her, you have to ask yourself, if you have stepped in to a bottom of the ninth, bases loaded situation, and you're the relief pitcher trying to get out the cleanup hitter at the end of the ball game. That being said, the ball game is not over by any stretch of the imagination. As we've illustrated just in the past 3 weeks alone, what's changed? What's changed in the past 8 days? So there will be plenty of things that change in the next several months that can tip this election in any favor. But you still have to measure what kind of uphill battle it is if you're someone who seeks the presidency in 2024 or 2028 or 2032. So I think Harris will have that over Newsom, Whitmer, Shapiro in them making the calculation, why would I defeat Kamala Harris just to lose to Donald Trump? As I mentioned, this is the first time something like this has happened since 1968. We brought this up to you several months ago right here on the Will Cain Show. We talked about the parallels, the similarities to 1968. Lyndon Baines Johnson was a sitting president. He decided not to seek re-election. He was facing at the time a Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy. Joe Biden and Donald Trump are facing to some extent, to the extent that he can get on the ballot, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Unpopular wars across the world. In that case, Vietnam, now Israel, Ukraine, facing Joe Biden. An economy slugging along at best. Health concerns for the president. LBJ had suffered a heart attack. As Dana Perino pointed out yesterday on Fox, the difference being Lady Bird Johnson didn't want LBJ to seek re-election. Jill Biden didn't want Joe Biden to give up his pursuit for re-election. And heading into a convention where you had riots and protests across the country. This time, it's over Israel and Palestine. It's on college campuses. It's in big cities. And it's anticipated to take place in Chicago. Oh, by the way, the same exact place as the Democratic National Convention in 1968. It's anticipated to take place in Chicago for the DNC in 2024. The parallels are similar down to the sitting president of the United States bowing out and not seeking re-election for president. What a moment. What a scandal. I mean it. It's comical. You step back and you can laugh at this bad parlor trick. You can laugh at a magician with no skill, that you can see where he's hiding the ball. But it's also super sad. And quite honestly, it's beyond scandalous. I think that the Democratic Party has just absolutely made invalidated, deleted the Democratic voter, has shown who actually calls the shots in America. And it is not Americans.
That was Will Cain. You're listening and watching the Will Cain Show on Fox News Digital. I'm Bobby Burack, filling in for Will. a very tan Will. Every time I see him, he seems more tan. I don't know if it's a spray tan or vacationing, but whatever. We digress. All right, coming up next, I'm going to have my thoughts plus bring in a panel. Also, did Joe Biden even have a choice? That and more up next.
It's time to take the quiz.
5 questions, 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
History, pop culture, science, sports, civics. How much do you know? Let's find out.
Who was the first person to walk on the moon?
Jackson or something?
Neil Armstrong.
Take the quiz every weekday at thequiz.fox and then listen to the quiz podcast to find out how you did.
Play, share, and of course, listen to The Quiz right now at thequiz.fox.
Friday on Fox Nation.
What you're about to see is incredible.
The sensational hit show bursts back into action.
Drop the gun!
Don't miss all new episodes of Crime Cam 24/7. New cameras.
You have eyes on him with the drone.
Exposing new crimes. And delivering swift justice. Crime Cam 24/7. New episode Friday on Fox Nation. Sign up now at foxnation.com.
America is streaming.
It's time to take the quiz.
5 questions, 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
History, pop culture, science, sports, civics. How much do you know? Let's find out.
Who was the first person to walk on the moon?
Jackson or something?
Neil Armstrong.
Take the quiz every weekday at thequiz.fox and then listen to the quiz podcast to find out how you did.
Play, share, and of course, listen to The Quiz right now at thequiz.fox.
You're listening and watching The Will Cain Show. I'm Bobby Burack, filling in for Will. You can catch the show on demand every day on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and FoxNews.com. Watching the reaction to the big news that Joe Biden's bowed out of the 2024 race, particularly from corporate media and Democrats, is how great of a guy Joe Biden is. I saw Van Jones and Rachel Maddow say he put the nation before himself. No, he didn't. That is such a lie. There have been calls for Biden to drop out since the night of the debate. Immediately afterwards, Nicole Wallace, Joy Reid, Chuck Todd, they said, wait a minute, this guy can't run. But Biden, what's his word, has been defiant. He told Lester Holt, George Stephanopoulos, Wisconsin Radio, that he is still the best candidate for the job. This was not Biden's decision. As Will mentioned in the opening, he was pushed out. The media wanted him out. The Democrat chief titans wanted him out, from Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. Donors wanted him out. The New York Times report on Thursday that mega donors were going to freeze their donations so long as Joe Biden stayed in the race. And we preview this at Outkick, where I write, the decision, the quote-unquote decision, was never Biden's choice. He had to look at a scenario twofold. Either try to stay in the race, get demolished by Donald Trump in November, and have the left hate on him just as much as the right. Now think about this. Conservatives, the GOP, they're going to remember Biden as one of the worst presidents in U.S. history. According to my calculations, he's probably the second worst after James Buchanan. They're going to remember him as the demented fool who opened our border, botched the Afghanistan withdrawal, increased inflation, and stumbled and mumbled every time he spoke. But on the left, think about it. If Biden was to stay in, lose to Donald Trump, they would forever shunt him as the candidate who helped elect Donald Trump. What do they always say? The threat to democracy. So Biden would have been hated on by both sides. Now, they look at him like a hero. They say, well, he stepped aside for the good of the country. The right doesn't care. They're never going to forgive Biden for how he destroyed this country, from the border to crime to inflation to discourse. But at least on the left, at least according to the people whom still care about Biden, he's a good guy. He got out of the race, and he's in the clear. Whether Kamala or another candidate, and we'll get into some of the options, loses to Donald Trump, that's not on Biden. They'll blame it on Russia, white supremacy, sexism, misogyny, not Joe Biden. So ultimately, in the simplest of terms, Joe Biden saved face by bowing out of the race on Sunday. With that, I welcome into my panel, somewhat like a two worlds colliding. On one side, it's David Hookstead, who's one of my closest friends in media I work with day to day, and Stacy Washington, host of Stacy On The Right, Sirius XM, who I join every Wednesday. Stacy, David, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Bobby, thanks.
David, we'll start with you. What do you think about that? Did Biden have a choice?
No, I saw a quote today. I believe it might have been in Axios where they said they were going to have 3 weeks of trying to do this the nice way of getting rid of them.
Yeah.
And those 3 weeks had come and gone. And now it was going to go on to the mean, hard way. Right. They were going to force him out one way or another. What those conversations look like Sunday, I would love to know, because he had just received those endorsements from a few DNC state heads literally hours before he announces he's leaving the race. At the end of the day, they were going to turn the money off. They were going to turn all the support off. You were going to see more and more senators, congressmen come out and say they want him out. The pressure became too overwhelming. And the biggest victim of this all is his wife, who I personally believe was the number one driving factor for him wanting to stay in the race. She loves the attention. She loves the power. Her Vanity Fair or Vogue profile's coming out. It's really a shameful situation, as you pointed out in your monologue.
Stacy, you and I talked about this 2 weeks ago. When David Axelrod, who is the mouthpiece for Barack Obama, when he went on CNN and said it's time for Biden to step aside and he can't win, we talked about it on your show. That was a direct message that Obama was done with Biden. You and I both agreed it was going to be very hard for Biden to come back from that.
Yeah, so the old power structures, the Clintons, they're the old kind of scaffolding that all new power was supposed to hang off of. But then you had Barack Obama. He came in and destroyed the Clintons' grip on the Democrat Party. They're still there, but they have not, their scaffolding is irrelevant. Organizing for America is the new scaffolding, and everything comes from that. Biden actually rode into the White House on the coattails of that organization. And so you have Barack Obama behind the scenes really calling a lot of the shots. All of his insiders are the staffers for the Biden administration. So I think it was something when David Axelrod came out, but I think the more telling thing was that they were leaking, the Bidens, their insiders were leaking to the media that they were going nowhere and that he would weather this storm. And the media was in the middle. They get their marching orders from Karine Jean-Pierre. This is what we talk about today. This is who we are today. This is how we feel today. And they were like, some of them going, well, Biden he's the perfect foil to Trump. He's the nicest and he's done well. And they would list off all the fake accomplishments. And then you'd see the other media apparatus going, he has to go. He's too old. He displayed signs of dementia. And so they were in a state of disarray. And I got to tell you, I've never had so much caramel popcorn in my life. I've enjoyed this past 3 weeks so much because they're always the unimind. They're like the Borg. And for once, we saw the cracks. We saw underneath that hive mind is a hot mess of, like, not just dementia, but mental illness. And they let us see underneath. And President Trump capitalized on that. His campaign, the RNC, it was a beautiful moment. Even the juxtaposition of President Trump rising up after having been shot in the ear and other shots whizzing by him while he was on the ground. And he stands up and in that moment decides that it is his inner self that, says fight. There's so much that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. I feel like we've lived almost a lifetime, maybe 10 years.
Oh, I know.
In the span of 3 weeks.
So I have Biden, as I mentioned, the second worst president after James Buchanan. Unless Biden really, really ruins the country the next few months before he steps aside in January, I think James Buchanan will still be the worst. Stacy, where do you have Biden's ranking all time?
Well, I'm from the last century, born in the 1900s. Okay. So I feel pretty confident in saying that for the modern era, Biden is the worst president we've ever had. And that's saying something because, Carter is a thing. Like we can still remember the Carter years, those of us who are from the 1900s. So I would say the reason why he's the worst president is because of the open border situation and the families who've lost their children due to the fentanyl poisonings or the rapes and the murders that the illegal aliens have visited upon Americans. I think that's why he's the worst president, because those families can't undo the ramifications of the open border.
Yeah, and that's a great point because when you tell the story about Biden, whether it be a Netflix documentary, a book, you have to mention the chaos at the border, which was a clear American last policy. Lincoln Riley is the avatar of that, but she's not the extent. There were a lot of other victims because of that senseless policy. David, I would consider you a historian of America. Where does Biden rank on your list?
I think you're correct with your assessment. He's number 2. I would put him ahead of Jimmy Carter, I think by a significant margin, to be honest with you.
Wow.
And I think the big difference between Carter and Biden is Carter was mentally all there. He was a terrible president and his policies were awful, but there was no grand cover up of his health. I tweeted this earlier today.
Yeah.
I've met Biden twice in the last 18 months. Both times they were both White House events. Both times he was rambling incoherently, clearly did not have any idea what's going on. At one point, his wife got him out of the room. It was beyond embarrassing, to be quite frank with you. Jimmy Carter, for all his flaws in the Iran hostage crisis and the economy, at least he was there mentally. He was there present and he knew what was going on. He's just terrible at the job. So I think number 2 overall, number 1 in the last 100 years is a very easy decision for me to make.
So let's transition. I think we all probably agree Kamala Harris is the prohibited favorite to replace him. Not official. It might be an open convention, but I anticipate it's her versus Trump on the nominee. Here comes the race card, right? You don't like Kamala Harris, you're racist. You bring up her very, very damning record as district attorney, you're racist. You're not sure about her, maybe you're sexist, misogynistic, bigoted. I mean, David, this is coming, right? I mean, we thought it was bad when George Floyd died and CNN, MSNBC mentioned the word white supremacy, I believe, according to Reuters, about 4 times a day. I think that number is going to be even higher going forward.
Oh, they're going to bust out the playbook that they love to bust out when they have no other options, which, like you said, you're racist. Let's go. Let's analyze her. She's the border czar, right?
Right.
She's a terrible situation. Millions of people are flooding in here. We don't know who they are. They're bringing crime and drugs and all this horrible things with them. Well, if I criticize her for that, we all know what the pushback's going to be. Well, would you say that about Biden? Would you say that about Trump or a white president? We have to reject that. We have to measure people on their merits, their accomplishments, and their record. I don't care if you're white, black, blue, orange, man, woman. It makes no difference because at the end of the day, you can either do the job or you can't do the job. You're either qualified to do the job or you're not qualified to do the job. Don't let the media fracture us and split us apart by convincing people if you dislike a politician who happens to be one race or another, you hate that race of people. It's just fundamentally not true. And as Americans, we cannot tolerate that. We cannot let it happen.
Stacy?
Soundbite of the day. You could take that and package it up, put a little music under it, and play it again and again and again. Every time they say white supremacy, we just cut straight to you and we play that. I agree, and I'll just say, for me, it no longer holds any power. I've been called a white supremacist. I've been called a racist. I don't know if people can see I have a permanent tan. I'm black. I don't identify as a black woman. I just am one, by the grace of God. So these are words that don't have as much meaning as they once did, but they'll still try to use them. And so my response to that is I did criticize Biden on the border. I did criticize him on pretty much everything I plan to criticize Kamala Harris on. But I plan to always criticize her after saying that I've been unburdened by what was, which was President Biden. Right. And now I will criticize her, with abandon because she deserves it. She is a DEI VP and she would be a DEI president. And I care deeply about the candidates that the Democrats bring forward because I'm an American and the president of the United States is my president, whether I'm a Democrat or not. And I'm not a Democrat. So I wish that they would field a candidate that I wouldn't be afraid of to actually win. Yeah. I think it's absolutely ludicrous that they fear Trump when they lived under him for 4 years and prospered. But it is not ludicrous for me to fear living under Kamala Harris because we already don't have a border. We already have horrible foreign policy and we already have terrible inflation. What more could she do to us? A lot more, because as you mentioned, she's got her full faculties of mind, which Biden didn't have. Imagine the disaster she can wring on us intentionally, like on purpose.
Yeah, and that's what bothers me so much. And I wrote about this last week when people say that Donald Trump is such a dangerous president. We lived it for 4 years. A generation's 20 years. So let's go through it. Donald Trump was the least dangerous president of the last 20 years by far. George Bush, who I don't like at all, was a warmongering neocon who got us into senseless wars like Iraq, did a terrible job. Barack Obama, I thought, was the most divisive president. Race relations skyrocketed when he blamed everything on race. We know how bad Joe Biden has been. We just documented it historically, from the border to him not being able to complete thoughts. But they tell us that Donald Trump is Hitler. What evidence is there of that? David, you were there the past 4 years. What was the worst thing Donald Trump did? What did he damage in this country? Yeah, we became more divided because of the response to Donald Trump, but what was so bad about him?
Yeah, I don't think he damaged anything particular where you're like, oh, it's fractured, it's broken forever. Obviously, Democrats aren't going to like him. That's okay. We have a two-party system here. But the problem is, let's go to the Hitler comment. When you call a guy Hitler for 8 years, you call him, a warmonger, which he obviously was not.
George Bush was, right.
He didn't start any major wars of any kind. But when you use this rhetoric, you're going to convince people, well, it must be true. Why would the news be lying to me? Why would they be saying he's Hitler if he's not? There's going to be camps in America again. It's crazy. It's crazy that we allow that rhetoric to get pushed. And the other thing I would say is the media, do not trust them. Listen to what you hear. Trust your eyes, because they will cut things up, dishonestly edit it, and then they'll package it out and they'll throw it out to the public. Case in point, the Charlottesville rally. Donald Trump said, I clearly condemn any white supremacists who are there or any racists who are there. They cut that. How many news stations cut that dishonestly? And people thought
all of them
for years. Snopes just recently changed this years later and said, no, he actually didn't say that. He was dishonestly edited. So that's why people hate him. I truly believe that, because they've been lied to. And that's not to say you can't disagree with his policies. Of course you can, but you've been lied to. He's not Hitler. He's just a politician.
Yeah. And Stacy, Donald Trump isn't perfect. No politician is. I don't know that he was the best president ever, because there's a lengthy list, but I think he's up there given pre-COVID, how well the economy was booming. But what say you? What is the negative of Donald Trump as a president? When you look at the 4 years he was in office pre-COVID, because once COVID happened, everything changed and a lot of blue states shut down jobs and schools. But Donald Trump was a pretty good president, objectively.
He was highest median household income for a family of four, largest jump in the median household income for a family of four for the Black community, lowest Black unemployment rate, no new wars started, most withdrawals. He actually took out Soleimani. There were some serious deleterious effects in the pro-terrorism world. He drove Iran, the nation state, almost into bankruptcy. They only had, I think it was like $3 billion to the entire country's net usable income because of sanctions. And he was doing that to starve their terror network, which it resulted in the end of ISIS. But if you talk about the things that were negatives, obviously President Trump went into office as a political neophyte, didn't have an understanding of what the deep state really was, and hired into his administration people who really worked against him effectively to thwart his policy. He also was unable to fully staff up the 4,000 positions that are open every presidential start. And because of that, he didn't have bodies in the bureaucracy to repel the deep states. They had a negative effect. They were very effective in pushing back on him. Also, the COVID policy, he kept bureaucrats in office like Fauci and Birx, who worked against him and actually helped the local governors and state municipalities implement lockdown policies on Americans that I don't think Donald Trump agreed with. And for a while, he had a kind of a love affair with warp speed, which most Americans like myself, I'm unvaccinated, pure blood sitting over here. I've had COVID, so I have natural immunity. I robust, like the fight we saw from him a couple of weekends ago. I'm like that with COVID. Come on, COVID, what you got? I have natural immunity. So there's a disconnect there. But all in all, even with those flaws, you cannot deny the fact that his economy, being as robust as it was, is the only reason we still have an economy now, because the economy was so strong. When COVID came, the lockdowns came, the economy could survive because it was so robust to begin with. So I have no problem criticizing him, but I have trouble ending on a bad note because he did so many great things, especially considering the fact that he'd never been elected before.
Yeah, so well said. I get it. His personality it upsets people. He's a bit
Like
arrogant.
him. Come on. He is rude. He is mean.
Right.
But he's also sweet and cuddly and loving. I love him. I think he's so fun. I love it when he's being insulting. I also love it when he talks about his family and he gets all romantic. And Melania in the red outfit at the RNC. Whew, it was a dream. It was a dream. I was smiling so hard and I posted a picture and I just thought, she's back, y'all. Eye candy for days. All of us want to wear her outfits. The men want to be with her and have her on their arm. It's joy in the nation. She's back.
Yeah. And Twitter agreed with you. She really did. Look at the trend. There were a lot of interest in Melania. Everybody else took a back seat after that. But you're listening to the Will Cain Show. Bobby Burack filling in for Will, joined now by David Hookstead and Stacy Washington. David, I want to transition to the attempted assassination. Every time I read about this story, I get more frustrated, skeptical, suspicious, scared. What thoughts, or let me rephrase that, what questions do you have about the attempted assassination today that you want answered immediately?
There's two questions that I want answered immediately, and I think they're the two questions every American should be asking. How is it possible, given the Secret Service's budget, technology, and manpower capabilities, that a roof 130 yards away from the former president, current Republican nominee, with a clean line of sight was left unguarded with nobody on the roof, on the ground, and this kid, this 20-year-old, was able to crawl up there and get off multiple shots? That's question number one. I know the Secret Service says it's because the roof was sloped. That's complete nonsense. We interviewed 3 former Tier 1 operators at Outkick. One of them straight up said that's complete BS. Another one explained how you can get snipers into any position. You can get them in trees, a sloped roof. That's a joke. Number two, and for the sake of the country's mental state, they have to do this. Every text message in this guy's phone and every search history he had must be made public. We need to know who he was talking to, what he was talking about, what he was consuming, what radical information was he being pushed, and if it came from other people, what networks, whatever it might be. Give us the phone, everything in it, and give us an actual believable excuse or reason for why that building was left uncovered, other than you're now telling us Kimberly Cheadle, the Secret Service director, who is an absolute idiot, and she doubled down on the claim today that the roof was sloped. I don't believe that. It's an unacceptable excuse. It doesn't make any sense logically, or anyone who knows how to get into a shooting position. We need better answers, and we need to know everything that was in his phone.
And Nancy Mace is on TV but a moment ago, really taking it to her, asking some really good questions. Stacy, what questions do you have? I assume the two that David has are also of interest to you, but what else?
Absolutely. David's questions are excellent. My questions have to do with the internal workings of the directorate underneath Cheadle. I'd like to know what their communication streams were. I'd like a FOIA request to be honored, opening up their email chains, communication spanning the past 2 years concerning whether or not Donald Trump could receive any additional Secret Service. He had numerous threats, and they requested over the span of 2 years and were denied at every turn. I'd like to see how that intersects with the request made by the Bobby campaign. It's RFK Jr. I keep calling him Bobby, but RFK Jr. campaign. They requested Secret Service once he became the independence nominee. He's running for president. He has a famous name. A number of his family members have been assassinated. No Secret Service protection for him until the attempt was made on Donald Trump. And he called out and said, Mayorkas, you should give Secret Service to RFK Jr. So I'd like to see those emails. And then last but not least, I'd really love to, I know she's being called to the carpet, but I think she should be forced to resign. I don't see they're now finally admitting today that this is the most serious failure within their organization in the modern era. She has to be let go. I know that Democrats don't like to fire people, and I know Donald Trump does, and that's another reason why I like him. But anyway, she has to go. I don't care that she's a woman, and I think her goals of hiring 30% women for the Secret Service have to be eliminated. And I'll tell you why. I'm a woman. I have to be 6 feet 2 inches tall, but I still don't think I am comparable to a man of my same height or a man who's 5'5", because I don't have the same muscle mass or twitchy muscle reflexes. I've not had the infusion of testosterone during my teen years, thank God, because I'm a woman. And so I cannot battle a man hand-to-hand combat. That's why I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment. It's why I own guns. I shot marksman on active duty, and I am loaded up to bear here at this house. And I'm concealed carry certified because I cannot match a man in strength, and the only equalizer for that is a firearm. And I have to be well trained in order to use that. That still doesn't make me qualified to be a protector of any person under any circumstances as a security person. And so most women are unqualified and unsuited to that role. And it's okay for me to say that and still believe that women are capable of doing other things as well as a man. We have to stop this. We almost had someone die because of DEI. We have to stop it.
I love that line. We almost had someone die because of DEI, because it's so, so true. And so few people are willing to say it, which is why I love having you on here. And I'm so glad that we've gotten to know each other, because you're one of the most honest voices in media, right along with David Hookstead. That's why I made sure when I was doing this panel that you two came on with me. But in the bigger picture here, and look, I know everybody's afraid of suggesting that it could be an inside job, and I'm not doing that, but Americans are rightfully skeptical. It's been 60 years. We don't know exactly what happened with JFK. They won't tell us. The documents are not out there. They're still classified. Americans are rightfully wondering, hey, what happened to JFK? Could this be related? Could this be similar? When you don't tell Americans what happened, their mind goes to that places. Why exactly the 9/11 document still classified? What excuse could there be for that? Maybe there is an excuse, but they don't tell us. So when you have so much secrecy to voters and people, naturally, minds go to different places. They think the worst. So I just want transparency. I want to know exactly how this happened, how the shooter was able to get on that roof, why they didn't fire sooner, and if the answers are valid, okay, we don't need to ask more questions. But right now, we're left with far more questions than answers, and that's unacceptable. This is our country. That's the point of a democracy. We decide who's in charge, how this country's run, and in turn, we need to know all the details, but we don't have the details. That's why we don't have a fully functioning democracy, because we're left in the dark more often than not. And that's what has me so angry about what is happening here. Now, I know it's early, so if we find out these details later, so be it. But we need to know them sooner rather than later, or this country is going to continue to spiral in all these different directions. David, I want to get you guys out here on this. What story heading into the election is not getting enough attention?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow. I would honestly say the story that's not getting enough attention is that Kamala Harris knew Joe Biden's mental condition for years, got out there and lied about it to the public, to the media for years. And if we have an honest media in this country across the board, which we don't, obviously, she would not be able to do a single interview from now through the election day without the first question being, when did you learn of Joe Biden's mental decline, and why were you not honest about it with the American people? That should be the biggest story of this campaign. She knows he's not able to run. She frankly probably knifed him in the back to get him out of her way. And so she's not able to come out and publicly admit that to us. But now we're not supposed to talk about it. Every reporter who comes in contact with her needs to ask, when did you know Joe Biden's mental decline, and why did you lie about it?
Stacy?
Yeah. So I'll just piggyback on that for 1 second and say her FEC filing for president is Saturday. Saturday morning, she was on television talking about how Joe Biden was competent, blah, 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 blah. It was some big issue. She was actually on, she's on the record as saying he's competent. Saturday, she files for president. Sunday, the letter on no letterhead comes out from Biden. No video, no statement. All of his public events have been canceled for this week. We have no idea where he is. I guess he's in Rehoboth Beach or Delaware, one or the other. I have no idea what is going on with the president of the United States. I'm on the White House press list. I get all of his movements. Where is he? Now, I'll check once we're done here. I'll go back on my email and see, have they updated us at all? Does he have any public events this week? I know he supposedly has COVID, but that's kind of convenient. I think the biggest thing for me is just, and it's any story and every story that the media has covered where they are lying about things that President Trump has said or done. Americans don't actually know a lot of the statistics that I shared with you a moment ago because the media will not report it. I think the biggest unreported story out of all of the biggest unreported stories, which is pretty much anything that has the truth attached to it, is the southern border. Most Americans don't know how many illegal aliens are in the country, how many people have been raped, how many children have been lost in the system, how many children are in the country with unaccompanied. They're actually with people who are their traffickers. How many of these chicken processing plants have 12-year-olds from foreign countries working in them processing our meat? How much of our meat goes to China and is being stockpiled to feed their military in case of an incursion? They're preparing for war with Taiwan. They think we might get involved. They want to make sure their soldiers have meat. What are we doing? Americans don't know how long it takes for us to build a armament of bullets needed to staff up a month's worth of our infantry firing, hand-to-hand combat war, firing bullets on the enemy. They don't know that hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have died in trench warfare. They're actually doing trench warfare in Ukraine. Russian bodies and Ukrainian bodies, just basically you throw them in the trench and they just shoot each other to death. It's senseless. It's not even real war making. The Russians are using mercenaries at this point. They can because their ruble is now based on commodities and not paper like our money. There's so much. I could go on and on and on and on. I feel like I'm exploding with this information and it makes me angry.
Me too.
Not as fun to be around because most Americans, if they knew this stuff, they wouldn't just be Republicans. We'd have rioting in the street if Americans really knew what was going on.
Yeah, right.
But they've been lulled into a sense of complacency by Karine Jean-Pierre and the Democrats. And I just want to shake them and say, wake up, honey. The enemy's not just at the door. He's on the street corner right there. You see those guys? We don't know who those guys are. We don't know 75,000 Chinese military age fighting men. We just deported 119 and China refused to allow the plane to land. I got so much. So I think the truth is the most unreported story. And we need it like we need air and water, and Americans aren't getting it.
Yes, absolutely. The truth. All right, that's David Hookstead, Stacy Washington. Thank you guys so much for coming on. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Talk to you on Wednesday.
Absolutely. All right, coming up next, is Kamala Harris like an interim football coach? What does that mean? We'll discuss. You're listening to The Will Cain Show. I'm Bobby Burack, filling in for Will.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
Hey there, it's me, Kennedy. Make sure to check out my podcast, Kennedy Saves the World. It is 5 days a week. Every week, we check in with Jimmy Fallon, bring in authors for the book club, and even treat some of your favorite Fox personalities to a very special happy hour. Download and listen at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.
Kennedy Saves the World. America's listening to Fox News.
Streaming now on Fox Nation, an all-new season of American Dynasty.
They had the dream. They had the idea.
5 new episodes.
Having the right idea at the right time is a golden road to riches.
5 new families.
They never stopped trying to come up with something.
Harley Davidson, Mars, Johnson & Johnson, the Carnegies.
He took that company where no one thought it would go.
And Anheuser-Busch.
What more could you want?
The monarchs of money are back. American Dynasty. New season streaming now, only on Fox Nation. Sign up at foxnation.com.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
Hey there, it's me, Kennedy. Make sure to check out my podcast, Kennedy Saves the World. It is 5 days a week. Every week, we check in with Jimmy Fallon, bring in authors for the book club, and even treat some of your favorite Fox personalities to a very special happy hour. Download and listen at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.
Kennedy Saves the World. America's listening to Fox News.
All right, looking ahead, so I had this map. Obviously, you need 270 electoral votes to win the election, and I've adjusted mine some. I think we're going to put it up there on the screen. So here is my prediction right now, and if you look at it, that is state by state, and this is assuming that Kamala Harris is the nominee. So I still have Donald Trump winning, but I do have it a bit closer than I did if Joe Biden were to stay on the ticket. And you look at that number and say, okay, Trump's in a pretty good position. Not necessarily. Because Michigan, against Biden, Donald Trump was up 7 points. That is outside the margin of error. Of according to some polling you see, it varies, but he's leading Harris sometimes by about 3 or 4, which is either within or just outside the margin of error. In Pennsylvania, it's going to be very, very close now, particularly if Kamala Harris were to select Governor Josh Shapiro as her vice president, because if Harris wins either Michigan or Pennsylvania, Trump's path to victory, unfortunately, become quite narrow. So I'm going to bring in the crew here. Dan, James, and Patrick. I know Will has nicknames for you guys, but I'm going to leave that to him. I do like Tinfoil Pat, if I must say so myself. Patrick, what do you think of my map? Thoughts, critiques, doubts, questions?
Yeah, I do wonder. I think you correctly probably pointed out that she'll get a bump early on.
Yeah.
But I do think that once people realize who she is, she couldn't get 3% of the vote in 2020. She barely won her election as Attorney General in California, which is extremely blue. I don't think she's very well liked by most people. I think these are going to probably start going down to Biden levels pretty soon.
So here's my analogy, and I wrote this at Outkick. We're all sports fans here. Dan, James, me, Patrick, Will, who's not here. He's on the way to Hawaii now. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but it's out there. In sports, particularly football, when you have a really bad head coach and he's fired, there's this phenomenon called the new coach, where no matter how bad that new coach is, no matter their long-term prospects, the team and fan base rallies behind that new coach simply for not being the other guy, right? We saw that with John Gruden when the Jaguars said, all right, we don't know if this interim's any good, but at least he's not John Gruden. That's what I think will happen with Kamala Harris, that you're right, Patrick. She's not a particularly popular politician. She never has been in her life, but she's not Joe Biden. And there is real concern among Democrats, which you saw in internal polling, that said a lot of Democrats that voted for Biden in 2020 might just stay home. If nothing else, Kamala Harris rejuvenizes that base. She adds some excitement, and I think she'll fare quite well against President Trump. James, how do you like that analogy?
Yeah, it's good. I think Republicans would not be smart to underestimate her at this point. I think right now we're kind of talking about a lot of some of the clips we see with her about being unburdened by what has been and the coconut trees.
Right.
But she's also a former prosecutor at a very high level and is someone that, but before Tulsi Gabbard knocked her out in that second or third debate, her first debate, when she went after Biden, she really knocked him hard. So I think she'll be a much harder debate opponent than President Biden was. So she shouldn't be underestimated, but I do wonder how she fares in the Rust Belt. If we just go by pure demographic breakdowns, if you go on 538, they have this tool where you can look at the 2020 margins and just play with it to say, let's say President Trump does 10% better with African-American voters. It really doesn't move the needle at all. If you move him up 1% with white voters, he would have won. So it's interesting to see how that'll break down. And obviously, the vice presidential pick should have some sway with it, but I don't know. It's tough to say. If you're a vice president and a young Democrat, do you really want to attach yourself to a ticket that right now looks destined to lose in pretty big fashion in November?
Well, I fear Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania. When I say fear, I'm very open about it. I'm not hiding anything. I want Donald Trump to win this election. I do not like Kamala Harris. I didn't like Joe Biden at all. And I don't like any of the other potential Democrat nominees. But Josh Shapiro is pretty popular in Pennsylvania. He is Jewish, and sometimes the left doesn't really like Jews. But I think Josh Shapiro is going to be a strong candidate for 28. So if he attaches himself to Kamala, does that give him a leg up or a leg down? I think that's the question. But I would watch out for him to get strong consideration. But Dan, back to my analogy, the excitement for a new coach only lasts so long because eventually that new head coach has to perform. And Kamala Harris, she'll have to perform presumably during some debate. Will that be when the excitement starts to wear off a little bit, or will the party still be all in on Kamala Harris no matter her performance?
Well, Will always jokes about me because I have a lot of lefty friends, and so I get that perspective. And people are very excited right now about Kamala because Biden's out. It's not Biden, like you said. It's not the coach,
right?
And they're really excited. But I think that might wane a little bit. Like you said, after debates, after things, people are going to see her out there a lot more than she has been because she hasn't been out there a lot, especially not for the border. We know that. And so I think people are going to see that and kind of wane a little bit. That's just my opinion. I don't know. But from what people I talk to, they think, and I do like the analogy that happened to me in high school with high school football coach. There's this guy around for years. Everyone hated him. And then he retired, kind of got let go, whatever. We got a new coach. Everyone played so much better. Everyone likes the new thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so
it's
it might work.
It's like me right now, right? Like, I don't know if I'm doing a good job, but I'm not Will
Doing
Cain.
great.
So a lot of people are like, hey, we like this Bobby Burack guy because he's not Will Cain. I don't know, Patrick. Fair? Not fair?
Well, I mean, I have to look at the numbers first.
Well, the numbers don't. I'm not talking about numbers because don't worry about numbers.
I don't know.
Let's just be honest
Simple
here.
math.
There are probably some people who are tired of Will Cain. I mean, look, he's admitted that he is a slow burn. He annoys people a little bit. He can be agitating. So I think me just not being Will for the next 2 days is a good thing. Now, in a week from now, people might get sick of me too. But but no, Patrick, back to the election. Kamala Harris, what has she ever done? I was on with Brian Kilmeade before the show, and he's asking me, what can Trump hit Harris on? Her resume. She was bad as a district attorney. She was a bad vice president. She's very unlikable. She has that annoying cackle. She's condescending, kind of a nasty person. I think Trump has unlimited resources to hit her on, starting probably this week.
Yeah, the only thing to avoid is just like kind of how she got her start. I probably would avoid that just because
hold on.
you don't want to go too much in the weeds.
Let me interject. And I don't know. I'm not going to say it on here, but Clay Travis, who founded the site I work for, he's all for using that card, the Willie Brown card.
Slick Willie.
Oof. I would say this, the who is Willie question. I'm going to let Clay explain that one, all right? Because I think, we'll let Clay handle that one. So I'll just say this. If it becomes more mainstream, I'm happy to address the Willie part of the equation here.
Right, but I think you have more than enough to hit her on outside of that,
Absolutely.
I mean, just her explanation of Ukraine versus Russia. It's laughable. But I mean, think about it. She's like inches away from the presidency, and she has never won a primary, like in two election cycles. That's pretty scary. That's like going back to Gerald Ford.
What does Stacy say? She's the ultimate consequence of DEI. Hard to phrase it better than that. Yeah, I'm with you. All right, so one final note. We have a great show tomorrow. I'm going to be back in the chair, and we're going to have Sage Steele on, one really biggest stars in media, left ESPN, sued Disney. But I want to talk about her thoughts on the election, race, culture, suppression, fear, being open, and not listening to people, being yourself. I can't wait to have Sage on here. But I do want to end on a bit of a light note. So NFL training camp started. Pretty much every team is in camp right now. So real quick, we're going to go around the table. What is your current Super Bowl prediction? Dan, we'll start with you.
Oof, that's tough. I mean, I can't bet against the Chiefs anymore.
Ooh, again, huh? Every year they're just going to keep winning?
I don't know. Because right now I haven't looked too much into it. I'm just going to go safe right now and with the Chiefs.
James?
I like a 2012 rematch with the Ravens besting the 49ers.
Interesting.
Ooh, I like that one. Patrick?
Well, since our dear leader is out today.
Don't do it. Don't you do it.
I love Dak.
Don't you do it.
Get out of here.
Leader.
No way.
No. You can't. I hate it. I hate the Chiefs. I can't stand the Chiefs.
You see Xavier Worthy, 60-yard touchdown in training camp, the guy who you said wasn't that good?
It's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. I mean, they only got better. They only got better receivers.
Yep.
I don't know what else you're going to do. There's no stopping them. It's going to be over.
So I've picked the Buffalo Bills how many years in a row, Patrick? Like 5?
Sounds right.
5? So I'll go 6. Josh Allen finally wins the Super Bowl. I'm going to go Bills. And I'll say they take on my Detroit Lions because, look, when you're in the Will Cain Show, you don't really have to be objective about sports and become a homer. So I'm just going to ride that wave and say the Lions finally make a Super Bowl, but they lose to the Bills. So, all right. Well, I really appreciate Will having me on today, and the crew, Dan, James, Patrick, 3 of the best in the business. You're listening to Will Cain Show. I'm Bobby Burack. We'll see you guys tomorrow.